And this is Maggie, in case you haven't met her before. And today's topic is the reframe. And reframing is when we just sort of shift the way that we're perceiving something through a reinterpretation. And it's a tremendously powerful tool to shift our experience of being. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells and your organs, and bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating every cell, electrifying and energizing all your electrons, all your molecules. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining stress, tension, fatigue, negativity. And now let's just gently bring ourselves present to our physical bodies by pressing your palms gently together and softly, softly rubbing your fingers against your palms to feel the delicious tingling and tickling and that wonderful sensation to bring yourselves present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, today we're talking about the reframe. Yesterday we talked about truth and the subjectivity of truth. And so now we're going to talk about reframing and how a simple shift of phrase even of interpretation can has the power to radically alter our experience. So I guess this all goes to the power of the mind and the power of our beliefs and our thoughts to impact our lives and the way that we interact in the world. But let's look at an example. So many of us have had issues around or tendencies toward perfectionism, and with perfectionism, there's perfectionism is driven by a certain expectation of things working out the way that we imagine that they should. There's all these um, projections of the way that things should be, right? And really, the baseline is that it's living in a world of expectation. And I had occasion with a client the other day to do a reframe that was so far reaching in their lives that it's really remarkable and so simple. So this is the example with expectations, expectations of things being a certain way. What happens is things either meet those expectations or they don't, and it's kind of black and white. And the likelihood is that things fall short of the expectations. That's the likelihood. What happens if rather than having expectations for an event or a situation or um, an outcome, instead of having expectations, what happens if you go into the event or the project or whatever it is with intentions rather than expectations? Look at the dynamic or even feel into the dynamic in your own body. When I have an expectation of how something should be or how I want something to be, and it doesn't meet those expectations, then there's a whole litany of things or emotions that cascade from that. Like, disappointment, judgment, maybe self beat up, maybe resentment toward others. It can go on and on and on. When you go into a situation with intentions, you can recognize that there's room for things to maybe turn out differently than you expected. And you intended for things to go well, and maybe they 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 went the way they went. And there's more room for forgiveness, for variation, for the unexpected, when we have an intention. And so it was really interesting how the nature of the considerations shifted as well when we shifted from expectation to intention. So expectation had to do, in this particular person's case, with, it was around an event, and it had to do with the nuances, like vases filled with flowers, and a decanter filled with lemon water with fresh lemon slices instead of a pitcher, for example. And the beauty of this was, by looking at the intentions, all of the details of how this thing was supposed to look to meet expectations shifted, fell away, and what emerged was a beautiful, beautiful intention of connection and joy and fun. And what that provided for this person who was hosting the event was a tremendous sense of freedom, a tremendous sense of relaxation, to just be able to enjoy and connect, um, and make this a welcoming experience. So it's radical. It's radical, the power that we have to recontextualize our experiences so easily, to recontextualize, to redefine the meaning, to reorient the compass, so to speak, to to create greater freedom and joy and expression in our lives. So, what happens if we shift the notion of an obligation to a privilege? Like, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but maybe, or a gift. So let's say, um, with a um, an aging friend or relative, feeling that there's an obligation to go visit them, um, because they're not feeling well, or just because they're a family member, or whatever the reason for the obligation is. What about shifting that to an opportunity and a gift to be able to spend time with this person while they're still around? Like, to recognize the preciousness of that time together. It shifts the whole experience. It shifts the way of being in that context, doesn't it? From okay, how much longer do I have to be here, to curiosity, to connection, to um, possibility of um, what might unfold in simply being with that person, and treasuring what they may have to offer. So the reframe is what we're talking about, and the power of reframing experiences in our lives. So a real simple reframe uh, is when we talk about problems all the time. there's a very different frequency, so to speak, to the notion of a problem versus the notion of a challenge. Most of us enjoy taking on a challenge. And when there's a problem, it's just like, oh my gosh, here's a problem, it's overwhelming, whatever, versus here's a challenge, I can rise to the challenge. It's a very different feeling. Going to school, I remember as a kid, going to school wasn't necessarily the most fun thing. But as an adult, I elected to go back to school. And even when it was really challenging, because it was at times, I went back to school for graphic design and, well, computer animation and interactive design, actually. And that was at age 40. So I was with all these people that were a lot younger. Most of them were a lot younger than I was. And a lot of them were under obligation to be going to school, and here I was just feeling like on top of the world. This was a dream come true. I was just so cherishing the time to immerse myself in these creative pursuits. It was even though it was really challenging, it was also such a joyful gift. And by appreciating it in that way, I came to it with a whole different energy and um, enthusiasm. So simple reframe, to be feeling obligated to make dinner versus feeling excited and grateful and inspired to have the bounty to be able to choose what to make for dinner, and to allow that to be a creative expression. There are all kinds of ways in which we um, we can reframe our experience to be so much richer. So I just want to say I haven't seen any comments, and it's concerning me because I know we've had problems with streaming in the past, and I'm wondering if that's what's happening now, if there's some kind of issue with the streaming. So I'll just make a request, if you're out there and you see this, there. Thank you, Make a Pathway, Louise. Thank you. I appreciate that. Just so I know I'm not talking into the vacuum. Now I at least know that you guys are seeing what's going on here. Good morning, Tammy. Thank you. I really appreciate you chiming in as well. And that's awesome that you listen while you work. I hope you find some inspiration here. And in fact, reframing with work is a really big deal. Like looking at a project that we might have ahead of us. We could feel like there's this project and deadline looming, or we could feel like, okay, great, I've got this frame of time that is helping to motivate me, or I maybe am thinking about something with dread, and maybe I can reframe it to be something that I get to source some inspiration for. Like I can challenge myself to find the inspiration to um, come at this with a more creative approach or perspective. So, um, yeah, there's a reframe when we look at our own failures. Just the word failure in itself is an interpretation, and we can reframe that to I'm learning, or I can see that this was a reminder that I need to take more time to pay more attention, or I'm failing forward, so or this is feedback. What we consider a failure is again against what expectations. We get to look at the expectations that we have for something that is is the source of our judgment about it, and the source of our interpretation. So it's helpful to look, especially when we're having a challenging time, a difficult time. It's helpful to look at what are we thinking about this situation that might be helping it to be really difficult. So when we're throughout the course of the day, if we're not feeling as energetic as we normally do, we might keep telling ourselves, I'm so tired. I am so tired. I'm so tired. Well, by telling ourselves that we're so tired, we're kind of hypnotizing ourselves into being that much more tired when we could be reframing that somehow to to allowing ourselves to move a little bit more slowly today, for instance, or as I'm moving a little bit more slowly, I'm going to pay more attention. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to be more mindful, perhaps. um, so this is reframing is a creative act of creating our experience. It's a creative act in and of itself, because we get to reframe how. So, another example. It's easiest by example, I think. Um, let's say we look at our lives, and maybe we've come through a tremendous amount of trauma and have really spent a lot of time and energy healing ourselves. Well, we could look at, I should be at a different place in my life. And maybe this doesn't even have to have anything to do with trauma, but we could say I should be, I don't know, I should be making more money, I should be having a bigger house, I should be all these different things. And we can be putting our attention on all these expectations that are unmet, or we can be putting our attention on all the things that we've accomplished. Maybe maybe we have become really expert at healing and at developing resiliency, and maybe that opens up the pathway for a richer possibility of career or accomplishment. That had we not been able to be, like we might say, I'm broken. That's a perspective that we can reframe to, I'm healing. I'm becoming more and more whole with every day. Um, the idea is to get out of the boxes that we tend to put ourselves in, not just ourselves, but our experience as well as the world. So what happens when we use our creative thought to entertain new perspectives? Well, what happens is we're creating more pliability, um, more flexibility, more possibility. Good morning, Dido. So good to have you here. Yay. I've missed you. So, yeah, we're talking about reframing here. And one of the things is we can look at our lives and say, oh my gosh, what a tragedy. Or we can look at our lives and say, oh my gosh, what incredible richness and emotional intelligence I've developed, having had all these experiences and having faced all these challenges. So we get, maybe we say, I don't have a college education. Well, we could also say I have a PhD in emotional intelligence, or in reshaping myself throughout my life. Or there are a multitude of ways to be thinking about things. The classic is the glass half full or half empty? And the truth is, the glass is wherever, it is where it is, and we get to interpret it as half full or half empty. And when we make those interpretations, our experience shifts accordingly. So we might be feeling that a half full glass is more promising, or we might, if it's something that tastes bad, maybe a half empty glass is more promising. It's so much of our lives, our interpretation. And that goes back to our conversation from yesterday about the truth. And you know, is there such a thing as a purely objective truth? So we human beings are meaning making machines. And the more conscious and aware we are of the meaning we're making, the more power and capability we have to shepherd our own lives, because we're conscious of our role in the quality of those lives by the conversations we're having with ourselves and with others. But the conversations that we're having with ourselves can change our perspective, so that from that new perspective, our behavior shifts, our attitude shifts, and therefore our external relationships shift in the world, right? So when I have a joy, an attitude of joy and possibility, I'm going to be interacting with people differently than if I'm if I'm coming from a place of constraint and obligation, right? I'm going to be, my whole energy is going to be completely different. And so we have this is the reframe is a really powerful transformational tool. The thing is that those reframes need to be structured in such a way that we believe them, that they're true. We can't just tell ourselves, for instance, go from I hate myself to I love myself, because yourself is going to say, no, not true. What we can go from I hate myself to I'm I'm learning to love myself more and more each day. That can be true, if we're able to connect to that. Or I'm I'm deciding to learn to love myself more and more each day, even. And that can move us into a new place. And when we have, for instance, when we have intentions rather than expectations, when we don't fulfill the intentions 100%, we know that it was an intention. We're moving in that direction. It gives us an opportunity to course correct. It gives us an opportunity to to adapt, whereas an expectation or a goal, I'm more about intentions than I am about goals, because goals, you either make them or you don't make them. And maybe we can set an intention to meet a goal, and that way, if we meet the goal, great. And if we don't meet the goal, we're moving in that direction. So it gives us a bit more freedom. And with that freedom comes a bit more of an opportunity to experience joy and enthusiasm and energy, right? Um, I think that it's really important to be able to course correct, to be able to adapt. And I'm all about moving from inspiration and intention, rather than moving out of um, an external an external measure. So that's not to say that we can't create milestones for ourselves, and it's not to say we can't create goals for ourselves. And I just believe that we want to approach those goals with intention, not like this is the goal, this is the objective, this external thing is my objective, and I am going to move hell and high water to get there, no matter what the cost to me or anybody around me. um, I think that that's a paradigm that's gotten us to the place that we are in the world right now. And I think that we're in an evolutionary stage where we get to be creating a new world that is more connected to our own humanity and to nature. And there are times for pushing through. Let that pushing through come from inspiration. There are times for throwing in the towel. There are times for throwing in the towel. And we can do that without an overarching sense of failure or being a failure. It's the expectations that drive this notion of failure, unless we reframe failure as feedback. Because truly, if it's a yes and no, up or down, black and white situation, succeed or fail, then then we get feedback. Did this succeed? Did it give us the result that we were looking for? No. Okay, so if it didn't, we can use that quote unquote failure as feedback so that we can modify our approach to be more effective going forward, right? And that's where intentionality has a greater staying power, in my experience, than a goal, for instance. Good morning, Lisa Phillips. Welcome, welcome. Good to have you here. We've been talking about reframing today, and the power that we have by creatively recreating the context for the way we perceive something. So it works really powerfully in relationship. It works really powerfully in the relationship of ourselves to ourselves. It works really powerfully in gaining understanding, in motivating, in thank you, Lisa. Lisa says perception is everything. Yes. and our thinking and the contexts that we create can has the power to alter our perception. And so when we presence ourselves to our own power to shift our perception by shifting our thinking, um, it's kind of like having a whole new magic superpower. So I'm inviting you all to be superheroes in your own lives. And yeah, we get to do that for ourselves and for each other by using the power of our minds and to elevate our thinking and thereby elevate our perception and our experience. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. This is my dear friend Maggie. And we go live each weekday morning on Enlightened World Network Facebook page. It is such a joy to be with you. And to those of you who are listening, who haven't chimed in, or or I'm not seeing your messages, just know that you're so, so, so deeply appreciated. Thank you so much. I'm thinking, I don't know if that's actually Ruth, but thank you. And such a joy to be here with you all. Until next time, lots and lots of love, and make it, make it a day of creative reframing to give yourself the optimal joy and experience. So much love to you.